I'm calling this section today, which is part 2 of the path, Hope, Habits, and Strength. So we'll be talking about these because I feel like they've got some alignment and support with the path. So it's a little bit different take on what we talked about last week. So today, a little bit of the agenda is we'll talk about hope. We'll discuss your experiences or your expectations of the path. If we have more people, we'll talk in breakout rooms. Otherwise, we'll just keep talking and sharing our thoughts, questions and answers. And then I want to close talking about habits and strengths. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Now I need to move you over here. So who remembers the steps of the path? Raise your hand. Okay, a couple of them. So this will be a review then for all of us because sometimes the words are a little bit strange. So we start off with
North Star.
North Star, right. And our step 1 is called touching your dream or touching the dream. And this is where we take a look at our North Star and all the things that are important to us and start dreaming about what we can do in order to further those. And then we have to narrow it down to a goal. Well, we talked about genealogy last week, and I said I wanted to learn more about my family. And so my dream would be to get younger members of our family to engage and be excited about family history, because like all families, we have our ups and downs in the history, but we need to know about it. And then my goal is to teach it to them. So now I'm going to move you over here. Go to step 3, which is ground in the now. And if you remember that, it's okay. So I want to teach about my family or whatever your North Star is. What does it take? What is it going to take in order to do this right now? Not so much what I need, but what are the dynamics? What are the parameters? And then one of my favorite ones, invite enrollment. Who can help us? But we also talked about what can help us, like resources and maybe genealogy websites, think of those natures. So I don't think we have to limit ourselves to people, although that was the original intent. Then step 5, which we'll talk about quite a bit during habits and strength, is to build strength. All right, I know from step 3 that it's going to take this and this and this and this. What do I have? How can I build my path with my strengths? And then finally, as we talked about, we get to, okay, what am I going to do? And in a lot of programs, we go right from like the dream to the action. The path takes us through a lot more preliminary steps, but okay, what am I going to do about this? And then monthly planning, which we'll also talk about a little bit later on, and commitment. And move this. And then we're back to our North Star, because to me, it all should tie into what's important to us. Any questions on those steps of the path? Got them memorized. You can take a test, right?
I don't know about that, but
I don't. I have to look at them all the time. But okay, just as a review. So we're going to start talking about hope. And I think it's very interesting that when the people who designed the path ended the words with hope. So planning alternative tomorrows with hope. Why do you suppose they did that? Any ideas?
Well, this is Clara.
Yes.
I find that obviously the path works if you're motivated. And it's very hard to be motivated sometimes, obviously. And something that is so very, very special really has even a sort of spiritual context is hope. If you don't sort of have hope in your menu, your recipe, your daily recipe, sometimes really hard to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Very nice. Betty, any thoughts?
I was just thinking about, like, from Clara, what you said, like hope also, in order to have hope, there needs to be a spark of confidence, even if it's deep down and you don't really know how to get to it. Like, I think that's the problem, you know, if you're really, really depressed, you don't have hope. But hope is, we can create hope. We can reconnect with that in ourselves. And I think that I love that the path is with hope, because sometimes I feel like that's the thing that I'm missing. Like, that's the missing chunk. Like, I need to connect with that. If I connect with that, then it's like, it's an inspiring feeling to conjure in yourself. So, and opens you up instead of contracts.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And Betty, that reminds me, we did talk about self-efficacy last week, the feeling I can do it. And I think you're right. People maybe who are depressed or don't have that self-efficacy would never attempt something like this, because that hope just isn't part of what they feel. Very nice. Anybody else? Okay. Well, we will turn to positive psychology to get a little bit of an answer about hope. And I always like to refer to Dr. Bruce Smith's book, Move from Striving to Thriving. And you got the PDF of that. Maybe some of you have actually purchased the book. They're the same page numbers, etc. But in the book, he has a whole chapter, Bruce does, on optimism and hope. And I think if this topic intrigues you like it intrigues me, then there's a place to really do some reading and some contemplation. Okay, so the question then becomes to me is, where is hope in the path? You know, it talks about planning alternative tomorrows with hope, but where is hope? And in my brain, it really shows up in two parts: touching the dream and sensing the goal. So these are steps 1 and 2 in our path. And I think this is appropriate because Smith says hope is defined in a realistic and practical way to guide us to reach our future goals. And as we talked about last week, with this dream and then this goal, that has the elements of hope in it. As Clara said, if we didn't have that, you know, we just wouldn't go on with this kind of a process. So hope is defined in a realistic and practical way to guide us to reach our future goals. And I think that's why steps 1 and 2 are so entwined with hope. But Bruce Smith also talks, he references a man named Rick Snyder. I was not familiar with Rick, Dr. Snyder, so I looked at him up, and he's an expert on hope. And he boils it down to where there's a will, there's a way. A little bit different way of looking at hope, but we've all heard that expression, haven't we? Where there's a will, there's a way. And that was kind of his byline. And you have the resource of where I got this information. But he was a positive psychology pioneer. He wrote or helped edit 23 books. He wrote 6 books on the theory of hope and 262 articles on hope. So I can think say probably he was a good expert on it, right? But again, where there's a will, there's a way. So if we have a little bit of maybe trouble with thinking about hope as part of planning alternative tomorrows, then I think going back to that is an easy reference. But I also think goals and hope are entwined. You really can't have one without the other. Does that make sense to you? I think we've touched on that a little bit already. So goals and hope are entwined, and I just loved that picture, so I had to put that one in there. Now, I have a lot of reference books about a lot of different things, and I wanted to see what hope looked like, at least in terms of what writers would write about hope. So one of my reference books is called The Emotional Thesaurus. Say that 3 times. The Emotional Thesaurus. So I looked up the signs of hope, and I thought these were so interesting. So if you're a fiction writer, or even a nonfiction writer, and you want to determine that your protagonist or whomever is hopeful, here are some things that writers could give them qualities of. The willingness to believe that everything will be all right. And I thought, well, that applies to all of us, doesn't it? If you don't have hope, then you're going to have a different attitude. You're going to maybe be less optimistic, more pessimistic. Everything won't be all right necessarily, you know, but hopeful people believe everything will be all right. Also, and this was an interesting one, hopeful people have a strong awareness of one's surroundings. Do you find that odd? Kind of an odd thing? Strong awareness of your surroundings. Yes? No? Yeah? Okay, I found it odd. Till I kind of
find it odd, but yeah, I think it takes work to be aware. I mean, I think it's a mindful act, but yeah, it's interesting that it comes up under this.
Yeah, I think you're exactly, that's the conclusion I came to, Tammy, after thinking about this. This is really mindfulness. And again, if you're hopeful, then perhaps you're going to be more aware, be more mindful of what's going on around you. Thinking positive thoughts. Well, this is kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? But it's not the, you know, fairy dust and rainbows kinds of things. I think this goes back to the self-talk that we talked about last week. Really giving yourself positive messages and hopeful messages. And again, going back to the first one here, believing that everything's going to be all right. We know sometimes things go wrong, right? We know sometimes things are less than ideal, but positive people, people with their glass half full, really think that those hard times are an isolated segment in their life, where people who are more pessimistic think the whole genre of what's going on in their life is pessimistic, is not positive, is negative. So it's a real different kind of approach to how we look at life and things. A sense of calm. I thought this was an interesting sign of hope. Again, I think it goes back to the mindfulness, maybe meditation, that kind of thing. Focus on self-improvement. Yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. We wouldn't be doing the path if we didn't want to do some kind of self-improvement. Refusing to speak or think in negatives. Again, kind of an obvious one. But I love this last one. Preparing for best case scenarios. A lot of people think, oh, I've got to prepare for the worst case scenario. What'll happen if this, and what'll happen if this, and what'll happen if this. But people who show signs of hope think about, okay, I've started on this path journey, and now I'm going to be able to do this, and perhaps I'll write another path on another subject or a branch off of that. But they see the best kind of scenarios going, instead of, I mean, you have to plan for the worst case scenarios, obviously, but I don't think I ever thought about, excuse me, planning for the best case scenarios. Any ideas about that? Yeah, Clara.
I don't have an idea about that. I think it's great. I think that's how you had this vision looking forward to. I mean, that's sort of needed, the picture kind of, but I'm still hung up with a strong awareness of one's surroundings.
Yeah.
I don't get it. How does it, how is that linked to hope? Or like, if you were doing the path, you might be like an entrepreneur. How does strong awareness of one's surroundings? What does it mean? I mean, how does it benefit you?
Well, and that's a good question, because I really struggled with this one too, other than the mindfulness. But I think, again, if you are not a hopeful person, if you see the dark side in everything, it really can cloud your vision. It really can cloud your perception of what's going on. You're not noticing the beautiful bird that's out there on your hummingbird feeder, or the little flower that's growing that you've nurtured so much. You're too maybe encompassed by looking at yourself, or looking at your circumstances. Oh, woe is me kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Like, you get so ingrown into your own quest, you
Yes.
sort of forget what's around you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? I mean, I'm making this up as I'm going along here.
I think also it has something to do with, if you're aware of what's around you, then you become aware of how everything that's contributing to whatever it is you're trying to build or create can have either a positive or negative impact, and may have its own potential and need for a path.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
the example I can think of in my own circumstances, I'm here at this farm in West Texas trying to bring it back to life. And there's all these little avenues that impact that. And one being, Clara mentioned the birds and the animals. And, you know, so how can I bring something positive to that ecosystem that is part of the bigger ecosystem?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I put out bird seed, and maybe I plant flowers that attract pollinators. And, you know, I mean, that's how I think of it. And but then, you know, there's people also that have different, everybody has their own unique needs. And so to be aware of all those, to me, it's like layers of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And if the more aware of it you are, the more you can be in touch with how it makes you feel and deal with your own responses to those, to your surroundings. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to try to get into complexity, but that's just kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think it goes back to gratitude too. This
Absolutely.
doesn't mention that particularly, but if we're aware of our surroundings, then we've got to be grateful for the rain, or we've got to be grateful for the you know, environment or whatever. So I think you're on a good thought there, both of you.
Thank you.
Hi, Karen.
Yeah. I'm also, Tammy, I'm also Texas, and I'm also a bird lover, feeder, slave. And so I you know what caught my eye? There are a couple of things you said, Mary, that I really appreciate. But this last one of preparing for best case scenarios, I can recall times when I've been like in committees or something, and we get so involved in planning for you know, the logistics and what could go wrong and how
Yeah.
we'll solve problems. And literally, we have been in some situations where it's like, what if this works? You know, and there's this dead silence, a little bit of everyone drawing in their breath and going, you didn't think about that, you know, but I love that you have it in here because it is really important. And I think it takes a mindset shift to make
Mhm.
sure that we're focusing also on positive outcomes.
Yeah.
I
Thank you,
agree.
Karen. Yeah. And yeah, I've been in those committees, Karen. So what if this does work? That's kind of almost a scary thing. Oh, well, I just thought I'd throw these in because, you know, we get real theoretical sometimes with our talk. And I thought, okay, let's look at some maybe real kinds of things. But we don't want to fall into magical thinking. And you know what magical thinking is, like the fairy and the rainbows and, you know, sprinkling. Oh, if I just think positive thoughts, this is all going to happen. No. You got to do the work, right? You've been there. Everyone's been there in one sense or another. But I do think it's important to remember as we're talking about hope, that it is totally entwined with our goal, which is totally entwined with our dream and our North Star. So let's talk about the work that you did last week, now that we're kind of warmed up, or might do in the future. So talk to me about your experiences, your thoughts. I'm going to stop sharing for just a few minutes so that I can see everybody. So the path, you've had a chance, some of you more than others, to think about it, to devise it, to worry over it, to, you know, have experience with it. What were your experiences? Good, bad, ugly, none? Betty.
I don't really know exactly what I want to say, but I'll tell you, because I wrote everything down and I was playing with this. I made a document and I was sort of playing with it over the last week. And I found it very intriguing, like as far as like what my reactions were. And like, it really helped me see where my blocks are in my thinking. But I also really love, I had these experiences like when you were saying, imagine best case scenarios, because I started thinking like, what if this ends up being just like I imagine it to be? Like this move, like moving to this house, and like now we're working with these architects to build this house in this place I love. And it's like, what if it actually works? And it's amazing. And it got me really excited. And I also am a bird fanatic, and I have a very, intricate feeding thing I do. Like, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this. And really, it just sort of opened my mind up a lot, like thinking about the different potentials, but also, I think I mentioned this last week too, like noticing I need to read more about self-efficacy, because I think that you talked a little bit about it. And I think I need to know more about that and cultivate that in myself, because that's where and doing affirmations, because that's where I get sort of hung up as I start thinking like, what if I can't do this? What if I can't just physically can't like get everything done that needs to get done and all the sort of interlocking pieces, and I get ahead of myself, instead of just taking my time and going step by step. So anyway, I guess that's a long way of saying like this document so far, and because it even changed more this morning when I was working with it, but it is helping me see how my thinking helps me and gets in my way. Like, so which is really super helpful, because this is a huge project that I'm like that we're embarking on. It's an enormous project for me. We've never done anything like build a house from scratch and in a rural place, kind of challenging environment. And so I realized like this is really helping me get a handle on it and feel more confident, yeah, feel more confident, like, okay, I'm actually doing the work I need to do to think about it correctly and not get all like wrapped up in negatives or being afraid.
Well, and I think negatives are sometimes a caution that we do need to pay attention to, but if more energy is into the positive, the best case scenarios, that's where we want to be. I wrote down some words of yours, Betty: excited, open-minded, and self-efficacy. And I do have a handout that a friend of Clara's and mine and Tammy's sent us on self-efficacy. I can send it to Tammy, or do you have it, Tammy? The one that Joe, you're muted, that Joe.
I do have it. Yes.
Okay. So maybe that's something we can pass on to people, because it's a wonderful topic, a huge topic, but Bandura did a lot of work on self-efficacy, and it's an interesting thing. So thanks. And yeah, I guess we're all birders, huh? Yay. In one sense or another. So Clara, I know, because you and I talked last week, you have a similar path to what Betty's talking about, right?
I do. It's about moving. And we've been working on moving for a long time. And we're on a whole nother page now. Betty, we should talk. Self-efficacy does keep me surviving. I think if you had a scale, thank God it's not my weight. If you had a scale, I'm moving up in the self-efficacy. It was really funny. I thought about it today. Just taking weight training 3 times a week, and not like an hour of weight training, like 20 minutes of weight training, has made me much more involved in self-efficacy. It's like, I can open this bottle, I can do this, or if I can't do this, I'm not stupid. I don't know how it translated, but it did. Anyway, what I did, Mary, was it kept me on track because I knew I'd come today. So several parts of the path, get others involved, was a real help to me. And when people reach out and want to help, I took it this time. And I think things are okay. We're waiting for the market to bust open. Well, the market's slowly opening. It is not busting open, but things are going to be fine. I don't know how to explain it, except between hope, self-efficacy, and having a path, it's really helpful.
So you've had a lot of experience with the path already. Yeah, some. Okay, you've had some experience. It's not a new concept, but maybe invite enrollment and accepting that help is a new
I
thing?
mean, I had never done this. You can't see it, but
Oh, yeah.
I
we can
never
see it.
made the 8 boxes.
Okay.
I said philosophical things, which didn't hurt, but this is like much more practical.
Yeah. And we want it to be practical.
I know, I was teaching it, which is very different than being a student. So now I can just be a student.
I think that template that you provided with those steps just makes it so much easier, because
good.
I found when you start out with the path, you have this overarching like idea, but then there's all these different little paths that you have to make to get to the big one.
Yeah.
And so it's like Betty was saying, you can get ahead of yourself really easily, and I do that often too. And I find that template really helped to narrow it and be more specific.
Good.
So I'm really grateful that you shared that with us. Made a big difference.
I tell you, it just came to me in the middle of the night one night. I don't even know where it came from, but you do pull your resources in when you're concentrating on something.
Mhm.
And that's a perfect example of that. It's like, oh, I've got to make boxes. So, I found it helpful, but it was just not anything that was planned at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Karen, have you had a chance to work on your path at all?
I have not. I watched the video, and so I'm holding back. I do have a comment, and I hope it fits in okay because I haven't done all the
Yeah.
exercise.
That's
But
fine.
what happened with me this past week is that I was asked to do, I'm in a mindfulness group at work. And I was asked to submit something for the newsletter. And as I was writing it, it suddenly struck me that I'm writing this in June and thinking, and we're talking about July. And I know this is really elementary, but it was like, oh my gosh, it's already July. And, all of these things that I'm writing about, the year is half gone.
Yeah.
And I know that's all really obvious,
No.
but my point is that this path helps us stay on track and
Mhm.
not lose track of time and not say, well, someday I'd like to do that,
Right.
or this, I can do this later, or I'm really busy now. My thing is I'm really busy now, so I'll make sure I get that done next week.
Mhm.
And so I just really appreciate all of that part of what we're doing, is that it really highlights time and accomplishing things that we set
Mhm.
out to do.
I think that's such a valid point, Karen. And we talked about this during the monthly planning step 7, that unless you write things down, it's a dream and you probably won't ever get past that. But also to put specific things on the calendar. If it's only once a month, that's fine. If it's every week, every day, all of us are in different places and maybe different places every day, but to write it down. Today, I'm going to look at the path, step 3 or whatever it is. And that does help keep us on track because we have so many commitments and so many obligations and so many to-dos and family and work and, all of those things. It's real easy to get lost. Yeah. So I appreciate your comments. Yeah. Any other experiences with the path? Good, bad, or ugly?
I think that idea about writing it down and just establishing your boundaries
Mhm.
makes a big difference. It really helps me to have it in my calendar to say these 2 hours, this is what I'm going to work on, and
Mhm.
to carve time out for these things, because otherwise you just never get to it.
That's right.
See, I just get so busy, and if I
Mhm.
don't, it's, yeah.
But it's also part of self-care, which we haven't talked about, but looking and planning and thinking, and to me, that's part of self-care. And that's an important thing as we go through life, is to take care of ourselves. Because I think and maybe some of you went through periods of time when myself was last. It had to be family, work, kids, all these things were piling in, and my health went pew. So I think this is a real self-care thing too. Thank you, Tammy.
I think self-care is a topic that we should add to our list for
Mhm.
events and really dive into it. And
Yeah.
because I think especially people age 50 to 70 plus, 70, 80 even, it's a habit in a way too of putting self-care on the back burner because
It
we're all
is.
so used to being so busy.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very important topic that we need to explore. I see Karen shaking her head yes too. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. I in the class that I taught for ENMU, the title of the self-care was "It's More Than Bubble Bath." Because we think, oh, self-care is taking bubble bath with candles lit, a glass of wine, and nothing wrong with that. But there's a whole bunch more to it. So
Yeah.
more than bubble bath. Okay, back to the path.
Exactly.
All right. Any other comments, questions, ideas about it? Let me get back to sharing here. Well, I had planned for us to next to go into breakout rooms, and with 3-4 people, do you want to do that, or do you feel like you've had enough discussion about the path? Questions, things that were, perhaps mystifying, whatever. Do you want to do a breakout room or not? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you.
I'm okay either way, but I'll just say that one thought that I was holding back in case we went into a breakout room was a little more discussion maybe on the hope part of it. Because I think a lot of us have come through the times when hope was a really weak word.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I hope this works out okay. And so it takes it takes some real intentional
Yeah.
work to shift away from that to, and what I hear you describing, Mary, is putting some power into that hope.
Mhm. Mhm.
And entwining it with our goals. So all of that, that's just commentary, but
Well, that's
the
a
hope
good one.
really intrigues me, and putting it together with our goals really, really intrigues me.
Yeah. To me, it was always kind of an afterthought, the hope part. I mean, I did the path. My first path was on stress management. And I guess I hoped it worked, but it wasn't a conscious part of what I was doing. So I think you're right. And the power behind hope could be a whole session too. I like that word, power. Yeah.
Mary?
Yeah, Betty.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like what Karen said, because I realized when we were talking about hope that and I like what you said, Mary, that was like adding power to that, or talking about adding power. Yes, you're talking about adding power to the hope, because I think that in thinking about hope, I realized that I don't really think I thought it was a good idea. I thought it might actually be a liability to hope too much, because then I might get disappointed. Like so, in the back of my mind. Of course, I'm not like happy person, hopeful person, I think, but then I'm like, well, but then there's this little sort of like, I don't know, maybe I'm setting myself up for something if I hope about it. I know that sounds like, I don't know. I feel like I'm just sort of figuring out that's kind of a block. And so it's very helpful to think about it as a power, because all you're talking about, it's not about magical thinking. I think I was sort of, like crisscrossing the two,
Right.
But about mindfulness, because I think that's that thing that we were kind of confused about. It's about being mindful when you're not aware of your surroundings, you're missing things. You're missing what's real, and so, and having a good sense of reality in your reality gives you better tools, right, to deal with things, to deal with what you need, the decisions you need to make. So anyway, I like that, the diving in a little bit more on hope, because I feel like I want to dig that in. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
And Clara might want to jump in on this with me, but I think people do a lot of people do have a philosophy: if I hope too much, I'll be disappointed, which is just the opposite of best case scenario, right? But I mean, I hear people say that all the time. Oh, I don't want to get my hopes up.
Mhm.
You know, that kind of phraseology. And I guess, you know, that's something that maybe needs to be explored deeply. You know, is that real, or is that helpful, or is that harmful to think that way? So I think you guys are right on with that. Yeah, we'll do some research on that. But yeah, I mean, I hear that all the time. Oh, I don't want to get my hopes up, blah, 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 blah. I'll be disappointed, you know. And I guess what the path teaches us is it's okay to hope. In fact, you've got to hope to do the path. There's no sense going through all these stages if you don't have hope. I talk periodically to the people who've devised the path, and I might ask them if they've got some more information about the hope part.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mary,
Yes.
I learned some time ago, but it really was profound for me. The disappointment in and of itself is not a particularly useful thing, because it could be that you set yourself up. You might be a little more toward the perfection scale than you should be. You may be unrealistic. Disappointment should be teaching us, oftentimes, I believe, that our expectations were a little off.
Mhm.
And that we pivot and go a few degrees in a different direction and things can work. But I'm a real believer in hope. And it was the last time I taught positive psychology, which was the third time I taught it, where I finally took the time to read more about hope. And I loved what I read.
Mhm.
The Audacity of Hope by Obama. You see it all over the place now.
Mhm.
And I think the path can be really useful for that. Why, for me, I have made more of an effort to reach out and ask for help, i.e., the step in the path.
Mhm.
There was another step. Oh, that monthly thing.
Mhm.
I had
The
never,
monthly thing.
I'd never done that before.
Oh.
And I reached out and made a decision about something I was going to do in September that I kind of discounted initially, but it's there now. And it's part of my path. So I put something in that I hadn't thought of doing.
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot of sense to, I hate to tell you this, Mary, keeping on schedule and then having some soft, gentle accountability, which means you have to do this again, because it'll be sort of hard to be out there. Anyway, Mary comes as a guest speaker to my class all the time, so it helps. Thank you.
But Clara, I think you just brought up a brand new thought for me. Can we work on or just dissect those steps of the path, and as we do our self-assessment, say, oh, I need to work more on asking people for help, or I need to work on monthly planning or commitment, or what, you know,
Yeah,
but
commitment.
dissect it. I mean, we presented it in like a loop almost, but maybe there's just certain things that for 6 months or whatever, I really want to concentrate on that. And that's kind of a new thought for me. How about you guys?
Mhm. That sounds good.
Yeah.
You mean like the calendar thing?
Yeah.
Like on a cat, yeah.
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 But any of it,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
probably not steps 1 and 2, the dream and the goal, but all those other supporting steps, grounding in the now. What will it take to build a new house in a rural area? What will it take to bring back a farm to what it could be? What will it take, you know, and really maybe not even do the rest of the path, but think about those things. I don't know. That's I'll have to
Mhm.
think
I
about
agree,
that.
Mary. And I think, for me, because sometimes these, life can just be so overwhelming, I think. And when I took on this, thinking through this project, I could easily get overwhelmed. But then I thought, my first real thought about it was, I do need help. And I do need to do one step at a time and just start close with what I know I can start accomplishing. And what are my resources to get the help that I need?
Mhm.
And, and then I can even take it further from there. But one of the best things I did was reach out to an organization called Holistic Management International.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because it was very similar to the path in their approach, because
Right.
their first question, they didn't use the word North Star, but what is your holistic vision? It's the same answer,
Mhm.
And so when I realized that, wow, I don't have to do this by myself, I can ask for help. There is help out there that can help guide. And then when you have the path to like create your little template here of how to get started,
Mhm.
it breaking it down and dissecting it, I think is invaluable. And then you can actually feel like you're accomplishing things.
Hold on.
So anyway,
I'll be
that's
right
my 2 cents on that. I agree with you.
Yeah,
It's only
I
taken me
agree.
2 years to get into this far into the path. So patience is a virtue.
That is
That's
true.
That's true.
It's
This
not for
has
the
been-
faint of heart, I
No,
don't think.
but this has been a fabulous discussion. Absolutely fabulous. I think we've pushed way beyond what I've ever imagined that we would talk about. I mean, I was trying to anticipate questions that people might have, but you guys have given just wonderful ideas and wonderful things to really bring it more real to people. So I think a lot of people look at the path and, they see the colored pictures and maybe the photos or the colorfulness and think, oh, yuck, I'm not creative. I don't want to do that. But there's so many ways to do it. And I think we've thought about it probably deeply here more than I've ever thought about it before. And I appreciate your input on this. Any others? We kind of had a breakout room.
That counts, I think.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing again, and we'll move on. So share your thoughts. We did that. Questions and answers. Anything else on, was it a struggle to maybe make a picture of your path? Did you create a path with the 8 steps in it? Was that fun? Was that not fun? You're supposed to be asking the questions, but this is my question. Did you enjoy it?
Yes. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. This is Betty. I really
Yes.
enjoyed it. I didn't do the picture yet because I just have been kind of doing categories like that you did the boxes. The boxes
Yeah.
are super helpful. So I've just been doing that, and eventually I'll do the, a picture when I have it a little bit more stable, I think. But I really enjoy it. I enjoy having it sitting around so I can look at it, and I can see where, I'm getting a better feeling for the difference between categories, like especially at the beginning, like the North Star in the sense of the dream and the goal, sensing the goal. So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Good. And I think what Clara said, it may take a couple of years to really get comfortable with it because there is a lot to it. But you've got the resource through Bruce Smith's book. He talks about it a lot. And then you've got the other resources. And I just got a message. My internet is unstable. So keep your fingers crossed I don't lose it. So any other questions or comments before we move on? I do want to talk about habits and strength. Let me get back to where I was. So any other, but since we're such a small group, you know, we can ask questions or have comments anytime. All righty, so the finish line here. We're going to wrap up talking about two things that we mentioned last week, support concepts of habits and strength. Kind of like I mentioned hope, but we delved into it at the beginning. Now we're going to talk about habits and strength. So tips for creating new habits. I don't have any, but what I have is a very helpful book called The Power of Habit. And this, if you're not familiar with this book, Charles, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Duhigg.
It's Duhigg. I used to work with him.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, tell us that. Tell us.
Oh, he's amazing. No, I used to work with him at the LA Times. I was there for like 9 years, and he was a reporter there, and since has gone off and become like a very, you know, successful writer,
Right.
Great reporter. But yeah, I just knew him from the newsroom, and his wife worked there too.
I was so impressed with this book. He really dissects and did a lot of research about what habits are. And you may not want to get into that much detail, but he writes it like a story, and it's got so many examples. But the thing that stuck with me the most, I think, from this book was what he called the cascade of habits, CASCADE, cascade, like waterfall, dish liquid, I don't know, cascade. And that is, once you set up a habit pattern, you have something that you start with. And he references making a bed. I'm like, yuck, you know, but making a bed, and I've read other research on making your bed in the morning, can start a cascade of good habits that you don't really have to think about. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. I mean, you eat and then you go brush your teeth, right? Usually. But you make your bed, and then this thing follows and this thing follows, and you don't really have to concentrate on them, but they set you up for the rest of the day as being a really good day. So for instance, you make the bed, and then perhaps you take your drink your big glass of water, and maybe you do a little bit of exercise, but it's not like something like, oh, now I've got to do this, but it just is part and ingrained in you. And that was such a meaningful part of habits to me. And I think it really goes in with what we're talking about with the path, that we're looking at it, as Betty said, she's got it there, she can look at it, get excited about it, and it just becomes part of us instead of this other, I have to do this thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, if you're looking for a book on habits, this is a good one. I looked and looked and looked, and he never really blatantly defined habit. And I have to have the definition. So good old Webster's, a settled tendency or usual manner of behavior. So we think about, okay, you know, brushing our teeth, even driving a car. When we first learned to drive a car, didn't we have to be intentional about everything, where you place your hands and how hard you press on the gas pedal, how hard you press on the brake? Some of us learned with a clutch, you know, all that stuff had to be so intentional. Now you get in the car and you drive, right? So it's a habit, a settled tendency. Everyone agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. But the path causes us to think about our habits. And sometimes that's not always the most pleasant thing, to really become mindful about those things that we do. And today we want to ensure that we are building habits that help fulfill our path instead of get in the way. So there may be some mindfulness that we have to really take to heart. When I'm looking at this, I think steps 5 and step 7 are most conducive to talking about habits. And that, of course, is building strength and Clara's monthly planning. We're always going to remember you, Clara, with this. So let's take a look at step 5. I have to keep moving you guys around so I can see my own screen. Habits in step 5. And remember, that's build strength, and that's your personal strength. And we'll talk about this again in a few minutes after we finish habits. But building this step says we assess what we have or what we need to carry out that goal way back there in step 2. Okay, so we're looking at, what do I do? What do I need to do to be able to function in this habit? So one of my thoughts on this, because I like to have examples, good habits might help me with that assessment. So I look at myself and I say, okay, I do things. When I say I'm going to be there, I'm there. When I say I'm going to do this, I do it. And I'm diligent about following through. That would be a good habit. A bad habit would get in the way. I'm going to say procrastination. Oh, I'll do that next week. Or, oh, my daughter used to just have a fit all the time. Mother, you say you put it on the list and then you never get to it. I said, yes, I do. It's just there's 180 things ahead of it on the list. I'm not procrastinating. But to her, it looked like procrastination. So, her perspective. But we need to kind of look at ourselves in step 5 and say, do I have helpful habits or good habits, or do I have habits that are getting in the way? Does that make sense to you?
Mhm.
I see some heads. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about this. I'm going to stop sharing. And I want you to think about how would habits fit into addressing strengths? So again, I think like with hope, this is one of those topics that we just kind of glaze over. So how are habits and strength related to you? Or are they?
I think that for me, if my morning routine gets interrupted or doesn't go sort of according to plan, it throws everything off. So
Mhm.
trying to stick to those morning rituals and taking the time to make sure that I'm attending to that, which includes some self-care,
Mhm.
really makes a difference. I mean, and if those habits are interrupted, or if I, for whatever reason, stop doing, like, for example, stop doing meditation early in the morning, first thing, then it really impacts my ability to have the spaciousness in my day to accomplish what I need to do. So it's really important to stick to those habits. And I know when I don't stick to those good habits, I should say, like making my bed and doing my normal routine, it really affects me and throws me off balance.
I agree. And then that your strength, or as you assess your strength, is you've got a good solid morning routine, you've got that cascade going, and it will get interrupted.
Oh,
We
yeah.
know that. But when it does, you may have to step back and do those things at noon
Yes.
or 2 o'clock or whatever, to get yourself in that mindset, that mind frame of I can do this, the self-efficacy kind of stuff. So your strength then, Tammy, would be that you know certain things have to follow in order, and then I have space in the rest of the day to do the things that I want. It's
Exactly.
beautiful.
Or the things that
Beautiful.
just show up, you know.
Yeah, the pop-ups. We call
Yeah.
them pop-ups.
Yeah.
Yeah, good thought. Anybody else have a thought about habits and strength?
I think mine have changed. And I hope for the better during the pandemic, because I had to change a lot of things when I started working from home. And I tried to be kind of intentional about what I was doing instead of just reacting. And on the other side of it now, I'm a more flexible person than I was in the past. And my habits served me in many ways. And I tried not to overdo it, though, on the habits and routines, so to allow myself some room to find new ways, which I feel like in the past 2 years, we all have had to find a lot of new ways to see things and do things. But I feel like being more flexible is a strength of mine that came out of that.
So as you're assessing your own personal strengths, Karen, you're looking at flexibility and being able to shift. Clara and I learned the word pivot way early on in our career with positive psychology. And I love that word, pivot, because that's certainly what we had to do during the pandemic. And I think sometimes that's what we have to do with the path. We were talking earlier about what if it works out? And maybe parts of it will, parts of it won't, but we've got to be able to be flexible enough to make those changes. These things are not written in concrete. That's why they're written on paper, so you can change them and change them in your heart and change them, other ways. Beautiful, beautiful. Any other comments?
I'm very similar to Karen. I wrote down patience and pivot as the first two words in number 5. And then I realized, well, yeah, when I pivot, I exercise patience.
Ooh.
And I kept saying to Mary, pivot. It's sort of like a New York, what's it called? New York dime. Yeah.
Right.
But it really became a habit. I guess that's why I'm bringing it up. If I get stuck in a corner, like I really do want to kill my husband, that's a good point to be pivoting. But there are many other things in life that way too. So anything that's sort of angst makes me uncomfortable. I'm trying really hard to practice the habit of pivot. Get that up into your vision. And stop. First of all, it stops you because you have to figure out where you're going in your pivot. And that allows you a space for patience. And that
Wonderful.
allows patience to clear your mind and probably have you be a little more grown up in how you respond. So it all pays off. But I just realized it, Mary, that I'd put patience pivoting.
Wow.
And I hadn't thought about it up until now.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I loved it. Thank you. It was you're doing.
We love that word pivot.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, I'm going to go back and start sharing again because I want very desperately to get to strengths. But we're still talking about habits, and I think it flows beautifully and quite seamlessly into our monthly planning, or however often you want to do it. They call it monthly planning. But just briefly remember the reasons for doing this. This is the slide from last week. is to write items or tasks on your to-do list or daily calendar. And why? Because we're building new habits and we don't necessarily always remember, oh, I forgot to do, I try to do like 25 squats a day because squats are good for you, right? And I get to the end of the day and I'm thinking, oh, I only did 5. 1, 2, 3. You know, I've got to do 20 more. So sometimes sticky notes are a great thing to do. But, you know, as you're building these new habits, you got to remember them or else they don't do you any good. And they do take time and work. So this is called the habit loop. And if you're not familiar with this, I think this is a interesting thing to know about habits. There's always a cue, then you do your routine, and hopefully there's a reward at the end. So I mentioned teeth brushing before. Oh, I've eaten this meal and my teeth feel yucky. My routine is to go brush my teeth and the reward is clean teeth. Yay. But if we want to look at it, more in terms of the path, then cue, routine, reward, they go around and around and around. So my cue is it's the 1st of the month or the 15th of the month, or, you know, pick a day, 1st of the week, whatever works for you, but that's the cue, it's that time. And my routine is I review what's on my path. I pick the first weekend of the month just to say, okay, where am I on these steps? Is it flowing along like it needs to? Am I stuck someplace? How is it? And then my reward is I've seen how much progress I've made on my path. Does that make sense to you? So again, the monthly calendaring, or however often you want to do it, is just so involved with habits, because if you don't look at things periodically, it's going to get lost, right? Yes. Okay. Now, one last resource, and I mentioned this book all the time, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. This book changed my life. It really did. I read it first about 30 years ago. I'd take my daughter to McDonald's and she could play on the jungle gym. She was, 3, 4. I could sit there and I'm reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People while she's climbing around. And so that's how I know it's been over 30 years ago since I read this book for the first time. But it's just such a wonderful book. If you're not familiar with it, check it out. All right, one last topic, and I need to move a little faster on this one, and this is strength. And, this is part of habit 5, building strength. Look to yourself to capitalize on your strength. But in positive psychology, strength has a particular meaning. And I love this quote. It's from Marty Seligman. He says, strength could mean many things, but what we are good at comes to mind. And if you're not familiar with this website, I want to just briefly familiarize you with it. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Jillian's going to pull it up for me. Okay. This is Authentic Happiness website, and you can see it's out of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Can you pull that up just a little bit, Jillian? Thank you. This is Marty Seligman, and he's reputed to be the father of positive psychology. And I'm reading this book, The Hope Circuit. Haven't gotten very far into it. He's written a lot of books, but he also runs this think tank. Okay, Jillian, if you'd put it down just a little bit. I have no control. No, up. I'm sorry, up. Up. Yeah, she's controlling this for me. What I want you to know about the Authentic Happiness website is this section. Yes, question. Thank you. She's wonderful, isn't she? Questionnaires. And what they do at the University of Pennsylvania in this happiness lab is they've got all these questionnaires. And you can take them for free. They're just very interesting if you want to learn more about yourself. But if you'll point down, Jillian, to the VIA, this is the one I want you to be aware of for our purposes today. VIA Survey of Character Strengths. And we won't open it up because you've got to sign in and all that stuff. But I just want you to know, if you're interested in this, if you go to the website and go to questionnaires, you'll see this kind of toward the bottom. Thank you, Jillian. Appreciate it. So back to my screen. And when you, I love this, knowledge is power. When you do this questionnaire, and it's called VIA Strengths, Virtues in Action, you're going to learn a lot about yourself. Has anybody done this? I think a couple of you have. Almost everybody. Okay, Karen and Betty. What Marty Seligman and his cohorts looked at was happiness, but they also looked at a lot of things, and they called them virtues in action. And it's kind of a strange title, but what they looked at was 6 what they call ubiquitous virtues, things that are common across cultures, religions, ages, all kinds of demographics. And they came up with these 6 that kind of go along with everything that people know as virtues: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And when you take the VIA questionnaire, you'll come up with information about these. But the thing that's the best, they divided these and said, okay, what kind of strengths or what kind of things make up these virtues? So in wisdom, we have creativity, curiosity, love of learning, perspective. In courage, bravery, perseverance, honesty, enthusiasm. I don't know if you can read all of these. Humanity, love, kindness, social intelligence. In justice, we have social responsibility, teamwork, fairness, leadership. Temperance is made up of forgiveness, humility, prudence, and self-control. Transcendence, appreciation of beauty, gratitude, optimism, humor, and spirituality. So when you take this survey, they will tell you your strengths. Now, you can see how that plays into step 5, right? You may think you know your strengths, and you might, but this is also a different, an outside view, more or less, of your strengths. And this survey takes a while to take because it's a paired response kind of thing. And sometimes I hate paired responses, but they gather information from people who take this. It's anonymous, but they're building databases about strengths or PERMA or some of the other questionnaires. I was shocked that my top strength was gratitude. And that just never occurred to me. And since I learned that, I've just increased my gratitude and my ability to understand gratitude many fold. Learning, that wasn't a big surprise. Humor will probably never be on there, although I try to be funny. But you learn a lot about yourself by taking this questionnaire. And the important part of this is, with the knowledge that you get from that questionnaire, you'll be able to assess your strengths for step 5 in a much more informed manner. Comments about that? Some of you who've taken it, did you have surprises on your strengths like I did? Clara, saying yes.
And I've taken it maybe 5 times now, and it's always different. Like I'm much more invested in spirituality than I used. I mean, I took it 20 years ago, whatever. I would also bring up that the Gallup has a strengths questionnaire, and I thought I would try that. But I really like that authentic happiness where you had all those other, I haven't used that. That's terrific. I'll use those too. I've always loved taking these,
Yeah.
these personality things. So I'm kind of like a lifelong learner of that kind of stuff. But I find it very helpful.
Mhm. Oh, remember back when Cosmo was a big magazine and they had all those, some of
Yeah.
you are too young, but they had all those tests that you took. I mean, I
Yeah.
loved taking them too forever, but these are more science-based.
Yes, thank you. No, it's really helped me and it really confirms. So I go back. I mean, when times get tough, and they do for all of us, if you know your strengths and you've been practicing them, they become the habit that you can
Yes.
fixate on that little 5 of them, say, and sort of bingo, I got to work on that number 3 one to push me out of this hole that I fell into. So it really is very helpful.
But what you said is important to know too, Clara, that they will change because you're changing and you're growing and you're aware, not you particular, but we, are changing and growing. So we want them to change. Yeah. Anybody else real quickly? Okay, we're pushing toward the end here and I've taken almost too much time, Tammy. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. No worries.
Okay. So again, the knowledge is power. This is a scientific based, because everything Marty Seligman does about happiness and positive psychology has science behind it. And it's not just some woo 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 kind of out there stuff. He's really made sure that there's solid stuff behind what he's talking about. And the path is just so much part of positive psychology. So, ladies, I've enjoyed spending time and traveling this adventure with you. I really have. This has been fabulous. But before we leave, I do want to give a shout out to the people who developed this in the first place. Jack Pierpont, John O'Brien, and Marcia Forrest. They're up in Canada. We won't hold that against them. But it was really originally developed as a way to help people with disabilities move forward in their community. I thought that was interesting. And they've been very generous. I wrote to them when I first started teaching the path and I said, can I use your information in my lesson plans? Oh, yes, please, please, please. But give us credit. Okay, so here's your credit, Jack. And you've got this link already from them, but wonderful, generous people. And I'm so glad they did the work that they did. So in conclusion, I hope to meet you again on the path of life.
Oh, very nice.
So Tammy, thank you, and New Mexico New also for the opportunity for all of us to really come back and learn more about ourselves, each other, and the path. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's so helpful to hear it from different perspectives and points of view, and I really appreciate the tools that you've given us.
Thank you.
So yeah, maybe we'll have to revisit this again.
And again.
And again. Yeah, definitely. I just want to mention real quickly also, we are so grateful to our sponsors who make this possible. So if you have an opportunity to engage with any of these sponsors, we encourage that. And our next event that we're going to be doing is in August. We're taking the month of July off. So August, we'll have Bob and Elaine Grassberger. Bob has been an instructor at UNM for many years, very involved in the business community, and they've put together a workshop on more years in your life, more life in your years. So that should be a fun workshop to go through with those guys. And Mary mentioned all of the resources. There's lots of resources that she's provided, and you guys should have those. If you don't have them, just email me at info@nmnu.org and I can send you those links. So Mary, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
doing this. It was really great. And yeah, if anybody has any other comments or questions, I would invite that now, and appreciate everybody being here today.
Thank you so much, Mary. So
No.
much. I'm so great. And gratitude was actually my top strength too when I did the VIA. But I really am so grateful for these teachings. Like they're really, it's like you say, like every day, every week we change and become a different person, like constantly. But I really feel like these things really help me
Oh, good.
sort of get better at the things I really want to get better at. Thank you. And thank
Good,
you,
good,
Clara
good.
and Tammy, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, Betty.
Just one more thing. We mentioned the self-efficacy handout. How will you be able to get that out to people?
Yeah, I'll send that out to everybody afterwards. So I'll just email
Okay.
it to you guys. So you
Okay.
have it.
Thank you. I should have
No
thought
problem.
of that, but I didn't.
No worries.
Okay.
I will do that. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jillian, for always being here to give us support in the background.
Yes,
Glad you were able to
yes.
join us today,
you.
Karen. And
Yes, Karen.
I'm sure I'll be seeing all of you down the road sooner than later, I hope.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.